Welcome to NPJR, where we explore the great outdoors one national park at a time. I'm Justin.
And I'm Robin. We encourage you to pause the podcast at any time and discuss some of our talking points or try answering our trail trivias. Today, we're heading to the sunny state of Florida to explore one of the most unique and diverse ecosystems in the world, Everglades National Park. This place is one of a kind.
That's right. The Everglades is sometimes called the River of Grass because it is actually a slow-moving river about 60 miles wide and over 100 miles long, flowing all the way from Lake Okeechobee in central Florida down to Florida Bay. The elevation change is only 14 feet above sea level at the maximum near Lake Okeechobee, down to sea level at Florida Bay. Only 14 feet elevation change over 100 miles. Wow. Prior to the digging of canals and building of dams, flow in this drainage system was slow and steady from north to south. The Everglades is the largest subtropical wilderness in the U.S. and was established as a national park in 1947.
The park is huge, covering over 1.5 million acres, making it the 10th largest national park in the U.S. That's about the same size as the state of Delaware. That brings us to our first trail trivia. Before human intervention, approximately how big was the Everglades? The Everglades was an estimated 8 million acres. Due to land development prior to its protection and damage due to power plants and pesticide runoff from the agriculture industry, it is now much smaller than it once was.
Back-to-back trail trivia. If the Everglades was still 8 million acres like it once was, it would not be the largest national park in the U.S. What is the largest national park in the U.S.? Wrangell St. Elias in Alaska comes in at a staggering 13.5 million acres, making it the largest national park in the U.S. No, this isn't a game show, but 3 trail trivia in a row? Yes. Do you know the country with the largest national park in the world? Greenland's Northeast Greenland National Park is by far the largest national park in the world, covering over 240 million acres. It is larger than 166 of the world's 195 countries. It's located in the secluded Arctic region of Greenland, covering nearly half of the world's largest island, and only a few visitors are allowed to visit the park each year. Back to the Everglades. Here's what's extra special about it. Everglades National Park is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, an International Biosphere Reserve, and a wetland of international importance. There's no other park in the U.S. that holds all 3 of these distinctions.
Amazing. Now, when you visit the park, there are 3 main entrances: the Shark Valley entrance, the Gulf Coast entrance, and the Homestead entrance. Each one offers something a little different. For instance, Shark Valley has this amazing 15-mile loop that's perfect for biking. And guess what? You're almost guaranteed to see alligators along the way. Speaking of alligators, let's talk about wildlife. The Everglades is the only place in the world where alligators and crocodiles coexist. It's so rare because alligators prefer freshwater, while crocodiles like salty or brackish water. So if you're lucky, you might spot both like we did when we were there. Crocodiles are able to live in saltwater because they have a gland that filters out the salt. Also, they eat items that can be thrown up in the air and go straight down their throat, whereas the gator will bite and eat their food. This is also why crocodiles don't tend to attack humans.
And for anyone participating in the Junior Ranger program, spotting these creatures can earn you some pretty cool badges. Junior Rangers are explorers, learning all about the park's ecosystems, plants and animals, and how to protect nature. I want to emphasize that the Junior Ranger program is not just for kids. The Junior Ranger booklet is such a fun way to be guided through the park. Each park has their own booklet, they are very well organized, and have thought-provoking questions that help create a deeper connection to the park and its inhabitants. We encourage you to pick up the Junior Ranger booklet at a visitor center, or print it off ahead of time if available online before your next trip to a national park. Right now, the Everglades Junior Ranger Handbook is not available due to the National Park Service working to make it compliant for those with disabilities. You can email them and have a copy sent to you.
That's a great travel tip for when you visit any national park. The booklets really are a valuable resource to enrich any park visit. A fun activity from the old booklet was a scavenger hunt bingo, identifying plants and animals and then crossing them off, and when you reach 4 in a row, you yell out, "Bingo!" We can't wait for the new booklet to be released. I have another travel tip specifically for Everglades. Be prepared for mosquitoes year-round. We went in March, and the mosquitoes were bad. I can't even imagine what they are like in the summer. This park offers amazing, free, ranger-led programs, so make sure to take advantage of that. We did a 90-minute kayak tour down the Buttonwood Canal, a ranger walk where we discussed the local trees, osprey, crocodiles, and manatees, and a bike hike in the Long Pine Key area. All of these activities just made the park so memorable and gave us a deeper connection to the park. Make sure to check out the registration guidelines for each activity, as each program runs a little differently. Now, back to wildlife.
Keep your eyes peeled for some incredible creatures like the endangered Florida panther. There are only about 120 left in the wild, and the Everglades is one of the few places they still call home. And let's not forget about the birds. Everglades National Park is a paradise for bird watchers. From roseate spoonbills, great egrets, blue herons, to the interesting-looking wood stork, you'll find hundreds of bird species here, including flamingos. Winter is the best time to visit if you want to see a variety of migratory birds too. Approximately 400 bird species winter in the Everglades. Unfortunately, bird populations are being decimated by an invasive snake species, the Burmese python.
Burmese pythons are native to Southeast Asia and have no natural predators in the Everglades. They are the largest subspecies of the Indian python, reaching up to 19 feet in length and weighing up to 200 pounds, about the size of a telephone pole. Once released or escaped into the wild in Florida, they quickly adapted to the ecosystem. With nothing to keep their numbers in check, they've spread widely, especially within Everglades National Park.
Pythons are ambush predators with a huge appetite and can eat a wide variety of animals. They prey on birds and their eggs, impacting nesting species and reducing bird populations. Studies have shown that pythons can eat birds as large as egrets, herons, and even wading birds, including some endangered species. Another trail trivia. Can you guess how many eggs the female Burmese python can lay at one time?
Female Burmese pythons lay up to 100 eggs at a time. This allows the population to grow quickly. With such high reproduction rates, the population keeps expanding, intensifying their impact on local wildlife. The presence of pythons is dramatically shifting the Everglades ecosystem. By preying on birds, they are disrupting natural food chains. Birds play key roles in the ecosystem, such as controlling insect populations and aiding in seed dispersal, and their decline affects other plant and animal species.
Pythons also eat many of the small mammals that bird populations rely on for survival, creating additional competition for food. With fewer mammals, birds that rely on similar food sources face increased pressure to survive in an ecosystem that's been thrown out of balance. Efforts are ongoing to control the python population, including removal programs and research on python behavior, but the impact on the bird populations of the Everglades remains severe.
One of my favorite animals of the park is the West Indian manatee. Talking about manatees makes me think of our time camping in the Flamingo area. Near the marina, there were a lot of manatees. A couple would come eat the algae off a rope that was near the dock, and they were so close. I just love these gentle giants. Manatees can live up to 60 years in the wild. They eat aquatic plants like cordgrass, turtlegrass, and eelgrass. A full-grown manatee can be nearly 10 feet long and weigh up to 1,200 pounds. Manatees have good hearing, especially at high frequencies, likely as an adaptation to shallow water environments where low-frequency sounds don't travel well due to physical obstacles. Their difficulty in detecting the low-frequency sounds of approaching boat engines may help explain why they are vulnerable to injuries from boat propellers, a major factor contributing to their population decline.
The NPS website says manatees were listed as an endangered species in 1967 concurrent with the creation of the Endangered Species Conservation Act, an act that predated the Federal Endangered Species Act of 1973. In addition to Florida, manatees are present in Georgia, Texas, Mexico, Puerto Rico, and elsewhere in the Caribbean. In May of 2017, the U.S. Department of the Interior announced the downlisting of the manatee from endangered to threatened. Population of West Indian manatees in Florida is now estimated to be over 8,000.
Another one of my favorite species that we were lucky enough to observe during their mating season while we visited the park is the horseshoe crab. This brings to mind a couple of my favorite trails. I loved the snakebite trail in the Flamingo area. We did this walk around 5 p.m. and we got so lucky with our timing because there were 6 horseshoe crabs that were mating. A really cool and rare sighting. If you do this trail, I recommend bikes because it is an easy dirt trail along a small canal. I also loved the 1 mile Anhinga Boardwalk Trail since we got to see a lot of gators up close and personal. Horseshoe crabs are ancient marine creatures found in parts of the Everglades, especially in the estuary and coastal areas where fresh and saltwater mix. These fascinating animals have existed for over 450 million years, making them older than dinosaurs. In the Everglades, horseshoe crabs play a crucial ecological role. They help maintain healthy coastal ecosystems by feeding on small invertebrates in the sand, such as worms and clams, which keeps these populations balanced. Their eggs are also an important food source for migratory birds which rely on them during their seasonal journeys.
Interestingly, horseshoe crabs are not true crabs. They're more closely related to spiders and scorpions. They have a hard, horseshoe-shaped shell and a long, pointed tail called a telson, which they use to flip themselves upright if they get turned over. While they may look intimidating, horseshoe crabs are harmless to humans. Horseshoe crabs are so interesting we have to do another trail trivia. Do you know the color of horseshoe crabs' blood? One of the most unique features of horseshoe crabs is their blue blood. Yes, blue. The blue blood contains a special substance called limulus amoebocyte lysate. This compound is used in medicine to test for bacterial contaminations in vaccines, IV drugs, and medical devices, making the horseshoe crab an unexpected hero in healthcare. While horseshoe crabs are generally abundant, habitat loss and harvesting for medical purposes has put some pressure on their populations. Conservation efforts in places like the Everglades help to ensure that these living fossils can continue to thrive and play their part in the ecosystem. Talking this much about horseshoe crabs reminds me of when I found that massive horseshoe crab shell that had recently been molted when we were camping at that state park in Delaware on the beach. It was about the size of a professional basketball, which is 9.4 inches in diameter. This made me wonder, what is the biggest horseshoe crab shell ever found? Well, in July of 2013, a couple from Greensboro, North Carolina, were walking along Holden Beach near Wilmington, North Carolina, and stumbled upon what would become the largest horseshoe crab shell discovered and preserved by humans. It measured 18 inches wide, twice the diameter of a basketball, and over 30 inches from tip to tail, almost the length of a professional baseball bat.
We sure have had some cool experiences with horseshoe crabs. Time for another trail trivia. Do you know how many venomous snake species there are in the Everglades? There are 4. This is our last species highlight of the day and is not meant to frighten, but to inform, raise awareness, and encourage you to stay alert and mindful of your surroundings. The 4 venomous snakes in the Everglades are the eastern diamondback, the largest, most dangerous, and most feared venomous snake in Florida. They can strike from a distance of 4 feet. Number 2 is the cottonmouth, also known as the water moccasin. This dark-colored snake is usually found near water. We did see one of these while we were there, so just be careful. Number 3 is the dusky pygmy rattlesnake, one of the smallest rattlesnake species in the world. And number 4 is the eastern coral snake, a beautiful snake with red, yellow, and black bands running down its body.
Have you ever heard of a scarlet king snake, a non-venomous snake species? An interesting fact about the scarlet king snake is that it uses mimicry as a defense mechanism. It mimics the color pattern of the coral snake with a slight variation. Many predators are deterred simply by the similar colors, providing the scarlet king snake with an effective form of protection. The difference lies in the band pattern. The coral snake's red bands touch yellow bands, while the scarlet king snake, the red bands touch black bands. The way I was taught to distinguish the difference is the phrase, "If red touches yellow, it'll kill a fellow." Just use caution and please do not touch any of the snakes. If you're close enough to be able to tell what colors are touching other colors, you might already be too close.
The Everglades has thousands of species of plants, including about 750 native seed-bearing plants and 39 native orchid species. Within the park, there are 47 listed as threatened, 113 as endangered, and 4 as commercially exploited. Some other native plants include cacti, succulents, grasses, lichens, wildflowers, seagrasses, and bromeliads. Bromeliads are really cool, and many grow in the form of air plants, also known as epiphytes, meaning they grow on other plants without harming them.
My favorite bromeliad, which is not native to Florida, but was introduced for commercial cultivation in Key West in the 1860s, is the pineapple. Pineapples are delicious, and they are thought to have originated in the Brazilian rainforest. By the 1890s, Jensen Beach, which is just north of West Palm Beach, Florida, was known as the pineapple capital of the world. From what I could find, the pineapple is the only edible bromeliad, so please do not disturb the air plants or try eating them. As a general rule, when visiting the parks, do not disturb any plants or animals. Please practice the leave no trace principles. Unfortunately, the Everglades also has over 250 invasive plant species, including melaleuca, Australian pine, Old World climbing fern, and Brazilian pepper, just to name a few. Before we move on to learning about some of the people of the park, I want to take a moment to say that we will continue to touch on various topics of the parks each episode. I acknowledge that everyone has different interests and that for a junior ranger who might love plants and animals, they may not love geology and rocks and vice versa. I want to challenge you, junior rangers, to show interest in an area that you may think is not interesting. You just may find out that you like some of these topics more than you thought you did.
That's a great challenge, and a challenge I feel we can all accept. Not only are there many interesting plant and animal species in the park, there are many interesting and important people of the park. Before European settlement, various tribes inhabited the Everglades. According to the NPS website, Spanish accounts suggest that the Calusa tribe were the dominant tribe of the region and operated a complex chiefdom that was comprised of a number of village communities, all organized within a chiefly hierarchy. Archaeologists consider this type of complex organization rare for non-agrarian societies. Despite their strong organization and power in the region, the Calusa disappeared not long after their interactions with Spanish explorers due to European diseases.
After the American Revolution, the Spanish claimed ownership of Florida from Great Britain in 1783. This was soon called into question by President Andrew Jackson, who invaded Florida in 1818. In 1821, the United States took ownership of Florida, and Jackson's exploits to seize all of Florida continued. In 1835, the Second Seminole War began and resulted in a 7-year struggle to remove the Seminole population from Florida. The Seminole, living in small bands, were able to elude the incoming troops by retreating further into the mosquito-ridden wilderness that left the inexperienced disoriented and frustrated. By the end of the 7 years, the United States relented on their earlier mission. However, the Seminole population had been largely relocated.
In the late 1800s and early 1900s, there was a booming demand for bird feathers, particularly those of herons and egrets, to be used in fashionable hats and garments. The Everglades, home to many of these birds, became a prime target for hunters who would kill the birds and strip their feathers to sell them. This unsustainable hunting led to a dramatic decline in bird populations, with some species on the brink of extinction.
Guy Bradley was an early and dedicated conservationist in Florida who played a pivotal role in protecting the bird populations of the Everglades in the 19th and 20th centuries. His work is particularly important because it occurred during a time when the Everglades ecosystems, especially its bird life, were under intense threat from the plume hunters. Guy Bradley was hired as a warden for the newly established Everglades, before that, the Royal Palm State Park in 1901. He became one of the first law enforcement officers dedicated to protecting the region's wildlife from the ravages of plume hunting.
Bradley was a passionate advocate for the birds of the Everglades, particularly the egrets and other wading species that were being killed for their feathers. He worked tirelessly to stop poachers and protect nesting colonies. Unfortunately, his efforts came at a personal cost. He was known to confront and attempt to arrest hunters directly, even though the law enforcement resources at the time were scarce, and poachers often outnumbered the park's few officers. Tragically, Guy Bradley was shot and killed in 1905 while trying to apprehend a group of plume hunters in the Everglades. His death highlighted the perilous work of wildlife protection in those days and brought significant public attention to the dangers faced by both conservationists and the wildlife they sought to protect.
After Bradley's death, his story helped galvanize the national conservation movement. His sacrifice drew widespread public sympathy and raised awareness about the urgent need for wildlife protection laws. This led to greater efforts to curb the plume trade and eventually contributed to the establishment of the Everglades National Park, which provided a protected area for the wildlife of the region, including its birds. Today, Guy Bradley is remembered as a martyr for conservation. His life and death helped inspire stricter laws against feather hunting and played a key role in the creation of protected areas for wildlife in Florida. His legacy is also commemorated with the Guy Bradley Memorial as well as the Guy Bradley Visitor Center in Flamingo, a reminder of his dedication to preserving the Everglades' fragile ecosystems and the birds that call it home. When we were there, the Guy Bradley Visitor Center was closed due to damage from Hurricane Irma in 2017, but it has since reopened in July 2023.
Another important figure and proponent of the Everglades was Ernest F. Coe. He played a vital role in getting this fragile ecosystem protected for all of us to explore and enjoy for generations to come. Coe, born in 1866 in New Haven, Connecticut, attended Yale and then moved to Miami in 1925, where he pursued his love for the Everglades' unique environment. Concerned by the destruction of rare bird species and plants, Coe formed the Tropical Everglades National Park Association, later Everglades National Park Association, and tirelessly advocated for the park's creation. In 1930, an inspection team, including conservationist Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, visited to identify potential park areas. Coe's efforts culminated in the park's dedication by President Harry Truman in 1947.
After Coe's death on January 1, 1951, at the age of 84, Secretary of the Interior Oscar Chapman honored him, stating, "Ernest Coe's many years of effective and unselfish efforts to save the Everglades earned him a place among the immortals of the national park movement." In 1996, Everglades National Park named its new visitor center the Ernest F. Coe Visitor Center in his honor. Coe's writings and the Everglades National Park Commission's papers are preserved in the park's museum collection.
Within the larger Everglades ecosystem lies various smaller ecosystems. Here we will define and describe a few to keep an eye out for while you're exploring the park. Hardwood hammock. A hardwood hammock is a dense stand of broad-leafed trees that grow on a natural rise of only a few inches in elevation. Many tropical species such as mahogany, gumbo limbo, and cocoa plum grow alongside the more familiar temperate species of live oak, red maple, and hackberry. Because of their slight elevation, hammocks rarely flood. Acids from decaying plants dissolve the limestone around each tree island, creating a natural moat that protects the hammock plants from fire. Shaded from the sun by tall trees, ferns and air plants thrive in the moist air of these hammocks.
Next up, pinelands, otherwise known as pine rocklands. These forests often take root in the exposed limestone substrate of South Florida. Fire is essential for survival of the pine community, clearing out the fast-growing hardwoods that would block light to the pine seedlings. The park utilizes a regimen of prescribed burns to mimic the natural pattern of fire and keep these areas healthy.
Next up is mangroves. Mangrove forests are present in the coastal channels and winding rivers around the tip of South Florida. The term mangrove does not signify a particular botanical relation, but rather is used to identify several species of salt-tolerant trees that thrive amidst the harsh growing conditions of the coast. Red mangroves, identified by their stilt-like roots, and the black and white mangroves thrive in tidal waters where fresh water from the Everglades mixes with saltwater. Everglades National Park boasts the largest contiguous stand of protected mangrove forest in the Western Hemisphere.
Mangrove habitat serves as a valuable nursery for a variety of recreationally and commercially important marine species like fish, crabs, and even small sharks. They're like underwater playgrounds for these animals. During the dry months, wading birds congregate here to feed and nest. And during the summer months, these mangrove forests provide the first line of defense against the howling winds and storm surges of hurricanes. Next, the marine and estuary systems. Florida Bay, the largest body of water within the Everglades, contains more than 800 square miles of marine bottom, much of which is covered by submerged vegetation. Seagrass and algae provide shelter and sustenance to numerous marine organisms, which in turn sustain the food chain that support all higher vertebrates in the bay.
The hard bottom areas of the bay are home to corals and sponges, a wide variety of commercially and recreationally important fish, crustaceans, and mollusks thrives within the estuary environment of the Everglades. The continued health of these marine environments is important in sustaining productive fisheries outside park boundaries. Cypress is next. Common throughout the southeastern United States, the cypress tree is a deciduous conifer that can survive in standing water. In the Florida Everglades, these trees are often found growing in one of three distinct formations. It is common to find a cluster of cypress trees growing in the shape of a dome, with larger trees in the middle and smaller trees all around. Cypress strands occur where the cypress trees grow in an elongate, linear shape parallel with the flow of water. In areas of less favorable growing conditions, stunted cypress trees called dwarf cypress grow thinly distributed in poor soil on drier land. The other ecosystems found in the park are coastal lowlands, freshwater marl prairie, and freshwater sloughs. You will see this word throughout your time in the Everglades, spelled S-L-O-U-G-H. It is pronounced slough in most of the U.S., sometimes pronounced slough in New England, and is the preferred British pronunciation. We encourage you to explore and discover these diverse and unique areas of the park on your next visit. Maybe you too will get to see some horseshoe crabs in a freshwater slough like we did.
The Everglades contains two types of soil, marl and peat. Marl is formed from periphyton, a mix of algae, cyanobacteria, microbes, and detritus. Also known as calcitic mud, marl is found in the short-term flooding wet prairies of the Everglades, where bedrock is close to the surface. It is the most common soil visible along the main road to Flamingo.
Peat soil forms in long hydroperiod or long-term flooding wetlands, typically in areas with deeper bedrock. Made up of organic plant remains, peat's color varies with its plant source, with sawgrass peat often dark brown to black due to frequent fires in the dry season. Marl and peat soils are like opposites that cannot coexist.
The Big Cypress Swamp. This forms the western boundary of the Everglades. Its underlying rock, some of the oldest in South Florida, consists of silt, sand, and carbonate materials. Slightly elevated above the Everglades Basin, it's mainly supported by coral-rich limestones from the Pliocene Tamiami Formation, 3 to 5 million years old, which are visible throughout Big Cypress National Preserve. Elevation here ranges from 12 to 39 feet above sea level in the north to near sea level in the south mangrove areas, with drainage flowing south and southwest.
Karst describes terrain shaped by the chemical erosion of carbonate rocks like limestone and dolomite. Acidic water dissolves the rock along cracks and fractures in the bedrock. Rain, initially near neutral in pH, becomes more acidic as it filters through live plants, decaying material, and soil before seeping underground. Over thousands of years, this process enlarges voids within the rock's pores and fractures.
Florida's extensive carbonate rocks are naturally porous and have been weathered since a major interglacial flooding event about 130,000 years ago. Since then, much of the bedrock has been partially dissolved by acidic rain and groundwater. The Rocky Glades area, a karst landscape, lies between Shark River Slough and Taylor Slough. Here, solution holes, pits in the karst formed when sea levels and the water table were lower, offer a winter refuge for aquatic animals and help repopulate the marsh when it refloods during the summer wet season.
Solution holes are different from sinkholes. Here are a couple distinctions. Solution holes form slowly and are common in southern Florida. On the other hand, sinkholes form when the ceiling of an underground cavity suddenly collapses and are common in central and northern Florida. Now, if you're planning a visit, there are a few things to keep in mind. Entrance fees are currently $30 per vehicle, like most parks, and that covers everyone in the car for a full 7 days. Or if you're really into national parks, you might want to consider the America the Beautiful Pass, which gives you access to all national parks for a year and costs $80 as of the end of 2024.
Great idea. And remember to bring bug spray. As Robin mentioned earlier, the Everglades can be pretty buggy, especially in summer. Oh, and pack lots of water, sunscreen, and maybe even a rain poncho. The weather here can be unpredictable. When we were there in March, we had highs of 93 degrees, and there were plenty of mosquitoes. I remember a conversation with a park ranger where he mentioned the most vital piece of equipment for them in the summer is a mosquito suit. He said the swarms are so thick, they look like clouds rather than swarms of mosquitoes.
So true. And while you're there, you might want to try the airboat tours. We had a blast. These are a huge hit with families. Gliding across the water at high speeds is thrilling, and you get up close with the unique plants and animals. Plus, the guides are super knowledgeable. You'll learn all sorts of fun facts.
Speaking of fun facts, let's have one more trail trivia before we end this episode and say so long until next week. How deep is the water in the Everglades?
The average depth of the Everglades is only 4 to 5 feet, with the deepest point being about 9 feet. The Everglades is a major water recharge area for South Florida through the Biscayne Aquifer. It also provides drinking water for 8 million Floridians.
Wow, there's just so much to discover. So for all our junior rangers, we hope you enjoy learning about this incredible, one-of-a-kind park. Remember, as a junior ranger, your job is to explore, learn, and protect these amazing places.
That's right. And don't forget to grab your Junior Ranger booklet at any visitor center to start earning your badge. Exploring the Everglades is an experience you won't forget. That wraps up today's episode of NPJR. If you haven't visited Everglades yet, we hope this inspired you to add it to your bucket list. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, share, and follow us for more outdoor adventures. And to all you Junior Rangers out there, good luck on earning your badge. And hey, if you've earned a Junior Ranger badge recently, send us a picture. We'd love to see it.
And if you want, feel free to share your latest story from your time in a national park unit. Who knows? Maybe we will mention it on one of our upcoming episodes. Be sure to include in the email that you grant us permission to share your story. I will include our email address, npjrpodcast@gmail.com, in our show notes. Feel free to follow us on our adventures on Instagram at NPJR Podcast. Until next time, happy trails, and remember, the Earth is ours to explore and protect, so let's get out there and do it.
Explore.
Learn.
And protect.